Have you ever sat in your favorite chair staring at your phone, wondering why it's been days, maybe even weeks, since your child last called? You think back to the birthday you never got a card for, or the time you needed help moving something heavy and they said they were too busy. And deep down, there's this quiet ache, not just from the silence, but from the feeling that somehow you've become invisible in their lives. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know this: you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not powerless. When we become mothers, we pour so much of ourselves into raising our children. We give them our time, our energy, our hearts. We cheer them on through every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every milestone. And then one day, they grow up. And for some of us, something shifts. The warmth fades. The phone calls slow. The visits become rare. And what replaces all of that love and connection can sometimes feel like cold indifference, or worse, disrespect. But I want to tell you something important today. You do not have to live in pain. You do not have to sit in silence, feeling forgotten. There is a way to heal, a way to rebuild your self-worth, and yes, even a way to transform your relationship with your children, starting from the inside out. Today, I want to share 7 powerful shifts you can make. Not dramatic moves, not guilt trips, but quiet, strong, meaningful steps that can help you reclaim your peace, restore your strength, and reconnect to what matters most. Let's begin with something that may sound surprising at first: learning to love with detachment. That might sound a little cold, I know, but hear me out. Detachment isn't about giving up on your children or cutting them out. It's about freeing yourself from the pain of needing them to behave a certain way in order for you to feel whole. It's about releasing the emotional chains that say, if they don't call, I'm not loved. If they don't respect me, I must not matter. You still love them. Of course you do. But you stop measuring your worth by their behavior. You become like the sun, shining, warm, constant, whether someone steps into your light or walks away from it. You love not because they acknowledge it, but because love is simply who you are. It's not easy, I'll admit. When a child you raised with your own 2 hands speaks to you with impatience or avoids you altogether, it stings. But detachment means you can feel that pain without letting it break you. You can say, I wish things were different, and still get up, make your tea, take your walk, and live your day with grace. That is strength. That is freedom. And here's something beautiful that happens when you stop chasing their approval. They often start noticing you again. When you're no longer waiting by the phone, when you're no longer hurt every time they forget something, when your joy comes from within, they feel that shift. And that inner strength, that quiet calm, it draws people in. Now, as you learn to love from a place of strength, not dependence, another truth becomes clear. You don't need to be accepted to be respected. That can be a hard one, can't it? Especially as a mother. We want our children to get us, to understand our values, our sacrifices, our quirks, but sometimes they don't. And sometimes they even judge or dismiss us. That can leave us feeling like we need to earn back their approval. But my dear, you don't need to bend, shrink, or explain yourself to be respected. Respect begins within. When you live with dignity, when you stay true to your principles and carry yourself with quiet confidence, others feel that, even if they don't say it out loud. Think about someone you admire. Chances are, it's not because they were perfect or popular. It's probably because they stood firm in who they were. They were honest, solid, real. You can be that too. You already are. When your children see you handling life with calm, making decisions that honor your values, and refusing to be pulled into drama or guilt, something shifts. They may not like everything you do, but they will learn to respect it. Because you respect yourself. Let me share a little story. A woman I once knew, we'll call her Ruth, had 3 grown children. One of them barely spoke to her unless he needed something. The other 2 had their own families and rarely visited. For years, Ruth cried herself to sleep, wondering what she had done wrong. But then one day, she made a decision. She started painting again, something she'd loved in her youth. She joined a small community group. She started waking up each day with a quiet little goal that had nothing to do with her kids. And do you know what happened? Slowly, things shifted. Her children noticed that she was different, stronger, happier, not needy or bitter, just calm and whole. And that changed the way they looked at her. It didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. Because she stopped begging for respect and became someone who commanded it simply by how she lived. That's the kind of shift I want for you. It doesn't mean cutting anyone off. It doesn't mean pretending things don't hurt. It just means remembering that you have value with or without anyone else's approval. And once you start living from that place of detachment and self-respect, you'll notice something else. The silence doesn't cut as deep anymore. The phone that doesn't ring, the unanswered text. They still matter, but they don't define you. You start finding peace in your own presence, in the sound of your favorite song, in the way the sunlight hits your kitchen floor. You begin to understand that peace isn't given to you. It's something you protect, something you build with intention. So if your children are distant, if their words wound or their absence leaves a hole in your heart, remember this: you have choices. You can choose to reconnect with your own joy. You can choose to set boundaries, not to punish, but to protect your peace. You can choose to love them without losing yourself. And you can choose today, right now, to take the first step toward healing. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be as simple as taking a breath and saying to yourself, I am enough. Because you are. You always have been. Now that you've started to reclaim your peace and recognize your worth, you may still find yourself sitting in the middle of silence, wondering what to do next. There's a natural temptation to break that silence with noise, to pick up the phone and pour out every disappointment, to remind them of all you've done, to demand answers, explanations, apologies. And you know what? That urge comes from love. It comes from years of being there for them, of giving and giving. You just want to feel seen again. But here's what I want to gently offer instead. Break the silence with wisdom, not with noise. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to make speeches to be valued. There is quiet strength in the way you carry yourself, in the way you choose when and how you speak. Sometimes the most powerful message is delivered in stillness, not in words, but in energy. You don't have to say, I'm strong now. They'll feel it. You don't have to say, you hurt me. Your calm, your grace, your quiet distance speaks for itself. There's something beautiful that happens when we stop reacting. When we let go of the need to correct or prove or persuade, that's when we find the space to observe, to listen, not just to our children, but to ourselves. What do I really need in this moment? Is it their approval, or is it peace? Think about a time when someone approached you with anger or accusation. Did it make you feel open or closed? Most of us put up walls when we feel blamed or judged. And that's what happens when we try to fix a broken relationship through confrontation. It creates more walls. But when we approach things with quiet understanding, when we offer presence instead of pressure, something opens up. Not always right away, but slowly, gently. And that opening is where healing can begin. Let me give you a small example. There was a woman I once met. Her name was Marion. Her daughter hadn't called her in 3 months. No birthdays, no holidays. Just silence. Marion was heartbroken, of course. But instead of calling her daughter to say, "Why haven't you called me?" she decided to send a simple note. It said, "I'm thinking of you today. No need to reply. Just wanted you to know." That's it. No guilt. No expectations. Just love. A few days later, her daughter called. Not with tears or apologies, but with a softened tone. She had been going through something. She didn't feel ready to talk before. That quiet gesture, so small, so respectful, was the door. Sometimes the loudest message you can send is silence that's filled with love, not pain. Wisdom doesn't need to shout. And now, as you begin to understand the power of calm and restraint, there's another shift waiting for you. It has to do with the stories you tell yourself. Because here's the truth. Often, the pain we feel doesn't come only from what our children do or don't do. It comes from the meaning we attach to those actions. He didn't visit. That must mean he doesn't care. She raised her voice. That must mean she thinks I'm a burden. The mind rushes to explain the pain, and sometimes those explanations are harsh. But what if they're wrong? What if he didn't visit because he's overwhelmed and ashamed of not knowing how to connect with you anymore? What if she snapped because she's juggling too much and forgot how to lean on you? Changing the narrative isn't about making excuses for bad behavior. It's about softening the sharp edges of assumption. It's about asking, is there another possible story here? Because when we shift the story, we shift how we feel and how we respond. That little pause, that space between what they do and how you interpret it, is everything. It's where your peace lives. And the more you practice that pause, the more empowered you become. I'll share something personal with you. A friend of mine, her name is Linda, used to get deeply hurt every time her son canceled plans. She told herself, he just doesn't want to see me. He must not love me anymore. And every time he canceled, that belief dug deeper. But then, after a long talk, she found out that her son was struggling with depression. Not laziness, not rejection, just pain. And suddenly, the story shifted. The hurt didn't vanish overnight, but her heart opened in a new way. She stopped blaming herself. She stopped blaming him. And with time, their relationship found its way back. Your mind will try to protect you by filling in the gaps with stories, but you don't have to believe everything it says. You can step back, look again, and choose a story that leads to healing instead of more hurt. And while we're here, let's talk about expectations. Because they can be tricky, can't they? Especially after 60. You've lived through so much, given so much, and it's natural to expect that love and care will come back to you in the way you gave it. But sometimes it doesn't. At least not in the form you hoped for. And that mismatch, that difference between what we imagined and what really is where most of the pain lives. Letting go of expectations doesn't mean giving up on your relationship. It just means releasing the pressure that steals your peace. You stop waiting for the apology, the perfect visit, the long call. And instead, you make space for what is. You shift from, they should do this, to, what can I do today to feel at peace, regardless of what they do? That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's maturity. That's freedom. You begin to notice things you missed before. The way your hands feel wrapped around a warm mug in the morning. The sound of birdsong outside your window. The smell of your favorite soup on the stove. Life starts showing up for you again, once you stop waiting for someone else to hand it to you. And here's the amazing part. When you let go of expecting your children to behave a certain way, you actually make room for them to show up as they are. And in that space, something more honest can begin. Something more real. Not every story has a perfect ending, but many broken ones have chapters still waiting to be written. And the pen doesn't always have to be in their hands. Sometimes you hold it too, not to rewrite the past, but to begin the next page, with strength, wisdom, and grace. So, if your heart feels heavy and your mind is full of shoulds, I invite you to take a breath, a long, deep breath, and whisper to yourself, I can choose peace over expectation. I can choose love without needing return. I can begin again. You've already come this far. You're already stronger than you think. As we keep walking this path together, I want to invite you into a deeper space. One that many of us avoid because, frankly, it feels unfair. It feels like we're the ones doing all the inner work while our children go on unchanged. But the truth is, if we want change, real, lasting, soul-deep change, it often starts with compassion. And not just compassion for ourselves, but for them too. Now I know, it might sound strange to feel compassion for someone who's hurt you, especially if it's your own child, especially when you've done so much and received so little in return. But compassion isn't about excusing their behavior. It's about understanding that every human being, including our children, is walking their own hard road. One we might not fully see or understand. That doesn't mean we allow disrespect. It doesn't mean we become doormats. But it does mean we open a little window in our heart, just wide enough to wonder, what might they be going through that I don't know about? Sometimes they're carrying wounds they don't talk about. Stress, fear, shame, the weight of their own expectations or even guilt they haven't been able to express. And when we're so focused on what they aren't giving us, we might miss what they're silently battling themselves. Compassion helps us see that maybe, just maybe, the silence isn't rejection. Maybe it's their way of protecting themselves from a conversation they don't feel strong enough to have. Maybe it's not that they don't love you, but that they don't know how to show it. Now again, this doesn't excuse cruelty or rudeness, but it gives us a chance to respond in a way that reflects our strength, not our hurt. Because every time you choose to see past the surface, every time you replace bitterness with curiosity, you give yourself peace. And you give the relationship a chance to breathe. Imagine sitting across from your child, and instead of asking, "Why haven't you called?" you simply say, "I've been thinking of you. Is everything okay?" That one question, asked without blame, can change everything. Maybe not instantly, but sometimes the smallest act of grace becomes the seed of a new beginning. A woman I admire deeply, her name is Evelyn, once told me something I'll never forget. She said, "I had to learn to stop seeing my son as the boy I raised and start seeing him as a man still figuring himself out. That shift saved our relationship." Isn't that beautiful? And that brings me to something deeply personal, something that may be the most powerful tool you have: serenity. Serenity is not about pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's not about being passive or quiet or nice. No, serenity is strength. It's the kind of calm that comes from knowing who you are, no matter what's going on around you. It's the kind of peace that says, "I may not be able to change you, but I can protect my own heart." When your children ignore you, when their words cut deep, you don't have to respond in kind. You don't have to match their energy. You rise above it, not because you're better, but because you've chosen to be wise. Because peace matters more to you than winning an argument or proving a point. Serenity gives you a sacred pause, that breath between what they do and how you respond. That pause is where you reclaim your power. It's where you ask yourself, what response honors my dignity? What choice leads to less regret, not more? Think about it like this. Your child might be the storm, but you, my dear, are the lighthouse. Steady, glowing, unmoved by the waves. You don't chase the wind. You don't scream into the darkness. You simply shine. And don't be surprised if one day your light guides them home. I remember a woman named Teresa, quiet, gentle, but full of fire inside. Her daughter had stopped speaking to her after a falling out. Months passed, then years. Teresa wrote letters, but never sent them. She lit a candle every Sunday and prayed not just for her daughter, but for her own peace. And she lived her life, not waiting, not aching, but full of quiet grace. One day, her daughter showed up. No grand apology. Just, "Can we talk?" And they sat. And they cried. And a door opened again. It didn't happen because Teresa begged or pushed or blamed. It happened because she stayed rooted in who she was, a woman of peace, of love, of strength. You have that strength too. You may have forgotten it in all the pain and confusion, but it's still there, right beneath the surface. And every time you choose serenity over reaction, you're watering it, growing it, owning it. So if today is quiet, if the phone doesn't ring and no one stops by, don't let that silence define your worth. Let it be a space you fill with your own warmth. Let it be where you rediscover joy on your own terms. Make your favorite meal. Play the song that makes you smile. Walk outside and feel the wind on your skin. These aren't little things. They're powerful acts of reclaiming your life. Because here's the truth. Your happiness isn't on hold until someone else shows up. It's here. It's now. It's in your hands. You can love your children deeply and still choose not to suffer because of their distance. You can hope for reconnection without losing yourself in the waiting. You can be a mother and a woman, full of strength, compassion, and grace. I know this isn't easy. I know the ache is real. But so is your resilience. So is your wisdom. So is your light. And just as seasons change, relationships can too. Sometimes slowly. Sometimes when we least expect it. But always, always, it begins with you. If these words have touched your heart today, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. You never know who else might need to hear your story. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're building a community here, a place of strength, of healing, and of hope. You deserve to feel seen. You deserve to feel valued. And you deserve to wake up each day knowing that your worth was never tied to anyone else's approval. Here's to living with grace, with wisdom, and with the quiet, unshakable dignity of a woman who knows exactly who she is. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, keep shining.